Hey everyone, in today's video I want to run through the 10 most important film cameras of all time. So obviously how you define most important is hugely subjective, and there's been thousands of cameras released, so how do we go through this? It could be the cameras that have had the biggest impact on my life, but that's a tad too subjective. So I'm going to be talking about the 10 cameras that have had the biggest impact on the way photography as a medium and a pastime and as a technology has developed. And a lot of the cameras I'm talking about will be actually systems, because the first one has spawned a system due to its popularity. Now, rather than going through saying the 10th through to the first most important, I'm just going to do it chronologically, starting with the old guys. You can't go past the Kodak Brownie. This one first came out in 1900 and it stuck around for like 5 or 6 decades.
The introduction of the Brownie was hugely important. These guys started out as a box variant, like the one that I'm holding here, and they were only $1 in 1900. That's still not insignificant back in the day, but for $2 you could get the camera, roller film, and get it developed. It really introduced photography into the lives of a lot of people that otherwise would never have been able to afford it. Over the years, dozens of models were released, including folding models like this one that had bellows, but they're still incredibly simple lens mechanisms inside them.
Next up, the Leica A. Now the guys at Leica, or Leitz as they were called then, were tinkering around seeing how they could use 35mm cinema film in actual cameras, in stills cameras, and they came up with this guy. Arguably the number 2 was the most revolutionary, but this started things off for Leica. Next up, the original Rolleiflex. In 1929 they released this guy and it just kicked off what is still quite popular shooting with twin lens reflex cameras.
Unlike a single lens reflex or SLR camera that uses a single lens to bounce the image up through a pentaprism to your eye for focusing and then also is used for exposing the film, a twin lens reflex or TLR camera like these Rolleiflexes have 2 lenses of matching focal length. One is used for focusing and one is used for exposing the film, and they generally had a waist level viewfinder.
Skip forward 20 years and Photopack brought out the first ever disposable camera. Now those first cameras have all been stepping stones towards making photography a mainstream hobby. They wanted to go the whole way and make it really affordable. It was only $1.29 per unit. Admittedly, it only took 8 frames, but it never really took off. It wasn't for a couple more decades until disposable cameras really became popular. In 1957, Hasselblad released the 500 series, which is evergreen. It's still really popular. There's been heaps of models through them. Take a look at it. This is sure to be familiar. Nikon had already been kicking around for 40 or 50 years, but it was in 1959 when they released the Nikon F that they really made a huge impact on the market.
Considering Nikon and Canon had both been around since the early 20th century, it's a bold claim to make, but many say that it was the Nikon F that brought Japanese cameras really into the mainstream, that it didn't have to be a Leica to be used professionally or for journalism. This thing was built like an absolute tank and precisely made.
In 1969, Pentax released their 6x7, a series which is still running today.
The 6x7 certainly wasn't the first medium format camera made, but this thing was rugged as hell. It'd survive a nuclear explosion. Obviously, it took 6x7 format film, and it functioned just like a huge SLR with the massive pentaprism there. This thing with just the basic accessories weighs over 2 kilos.
Couple of controversial ones now. In 1978, Canon released the A1. Some would call it the beginning of the end.
And why would anyone say that? Well, this was the first camera to really hit the market that had not only aperture priority setting and shutter, but a full program auto exposure mode that could work it all out for you. I personally think anything that brings photography more into the mainstream and has more people enjoying it as a hobby is a good thing.
Now this one's sure to ruffle some feathers, but I'm going to throw it in there. The Holga 120 series. This was available in China from the early 1980s, but it really took off in the West in the late 90s. Now, the image quality is what it is. You are probably either into it or not into it.
But the fact that it mobilized millions of Chinese to take up photography in the 80s, and then in the 2000s mobilized millions of Westerners to rediscover film photography, I think it's worthy.
The final one I want to discuss, and it was really hard keeping this to 10, was the Mamiya 7.
So why does this get the top spot? Yes, it's compact, relatively so anyway, great build quality, great range of lenses, great legacy, and it does have full compatibility with digital backs. All of that is true, but the reason I'm giving it top spot is it's still on sale today. Almost 20 years since it was first released, it's still the choice of a lot of professional photographers who are shooting medium format film.
So there's my 10 most important and influential film cameras of all time. Highly subjective, I know, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think that I omitted that should have been included? And what would be the most important film camera that you've ever owned, either because you just loved it or that it spurred some change in your progression? Please click to like and subscribe, leave us those comments below, and I'll see you soon. Loads more gear talk coming soon.